What's the deal? It's your boy, Mr. Will. And you are now tuned in to Wilson Block of Thou Wow, okay? Now check this out, man. I gotta bring this to you raw because apparently the Wilson Block is the only outlet out there, the only platform out there that's actually exposing public corruption in our criminal justice system in California and Los Angeles County in particular, okay? A lot of the local publications and publications around the country have been duly notified, okay, but just take no interest, okay? The biggest podcast, and nobody cares that judges and lawyers are breaching attorney-client privilege using clients' own statements against them that were made in confidence to the attorney. And, we have public defenders engaging in prosecutorial conduct these days, okay? We cannot stand for this, okay? So today, we're going to talk about head public defender Ricardo Garcia, okay? Bar number 178111, okay? Permits deputies to breach their fiduciary duties, okay? Now, there is a department-wide, and really it goes even beyond the department level, but there is a department-wide dereliction of duty under head public defender Ricardo Garcia's leadership, okay? He has, in fact, permitted his deputies to declare ex parte conflicts of interest to avoid accountability for repurposing court-ordered psych evaluations without authorization. Ricardo Garcia is engaging in selective silence because he knows he is acting at the behest of corrupt judges within the LA County Superior Court system. There are attorney duties and obligations, and then there is the practical nature of courthouse relationships between officers of the court. So while the court might publicly affirm that they protect defendants' rights, in practice, they actually prioritize judicial interests, which are always kept a secret. Ricardo Garcia's office is also in violation right now, as we speak, of the California Public Records Act by failing to even respond to any request for public records that I have made, okay? Just because an attorney does not have a formal record of discipline does not mean the state bar hasn't been subjectively negligent in their complaint process. Okay, it's like, when you call the police and you say, hey, I just seen somebody get mugged, or hey, I just seen a break-in, or hey, I just seen a car, right? Like, they don't mandate that you have to report the crime in a certain type of way. Okay, as long as you report the crime and they get the information, the police are coming. Okay, so in the complaint process, complaints shouldn't be being closed on the basis of, the complainant didn't word it a certain way, or it's just, come on, don't be prejudicial. Okay. Every deputy public defender under the supervision or direction of Ricardo Garcia, who has participated in the case People versus Michael Taylor, has engaged in prosecutorial conduct. For example, Michael Herman Samaji, bar number 201301, the public defender in Hollywood Court, which I'm not sure if he's still there or not, refused to represent me if it meant defending my constitutional rights. The doubt to my competence had a material procedural defect, and Samaji suppressed my ability and interest in preserving the issue. I asserted my Sixth Amendment rights to him in a text message, and about 5 or 6 minutes later, he replies with an ex parte conflict of interest without reason, without citation, and without a court hearing. The public defender's office to this day has refused to give me the reason for this conflict of interest because apparently Judge Ronald Owen Kay in Hollywood Court directed them to do it to insulate himself and Judge Suzette Louise Clover in Pasadena, who's now retired, who relied on fabricated evidence to justify suspending criminal proceedings. Okay? Now, the alternate public defender, Hannah Mandel, picked up my case, but would do exactly as Samaji did in declaring an ex parte conflict of interest without reason or citation. I'll cover their conduct in another episode because right now I'm focusing on deputies under Ricardo Garcia. Okay? Kelly Louise O'Brien, bar number 173598, the then supervisor of public defenders in Hollywood Court, further solidified these breaches of duty by Samaji and Daroka Bell in a department-wide cover-up of judicial public corruption. All my complaints, all my objections, and all my assertions went ignored and dismissed despite the legal evidence corroborating my allegations. Again, I was basing all my allegations on documentation that was already filed. You see. So I wasn't just making subjective arguments because they did something I just didn't like. It's like, okay, well, no. You guys are making decisions that's violating court orders that are already standing, okay? And I mean, either you correct that or you issue a new order. I mean, listen, I'm not here to tell the judge what they're supposed to do. Okay? What I'm doing is just trying to access the legal process. Okay? Just making sure that I have access, an opportunity, a meaningful opportunity to be able to note objections, okay? To be able to claim privilege, to be able to do, to make legal maneuvers that I have an inherent legal right to do. Okay? Nobody's asking for the moon here, okay? Everything I requested from my attorneys has always been well within their duties and obligations as attorneys, okay? And just so you know, they kept trying to tell me that, oh, well, if you want to file this motion or make this claim, why don't you either hire an attorney or represent yourself? Okay, let me address that real quick, okay? First of all, when you're innocent, doesn't matter whether your attorney is paid in private or a public defender. They both share the same duties and obligations, okay? Regardless of what the facts are, you have a duty, attorney, to protect my constitutional rights at all stages of legal proceedings, okay? And so you're going to protect my rights if you don't do nothing else, okay? So the upholding of my constitutional rights throughout legal proceedings is satisfactory representation in any case, okay? So the way these attorneys, the state bar and the judges and all this stuff, okay, are treating, legal arguments versus factual arguments, making sure that defendants are not afforded an opportunity, a meaningful opportunity at that, to preserve issues for appeal, note objections, okay, and to make informed decisions. You understand, okay? They're using competency proceedings to strip the rights out of defendants who exercise their legal agency. Okay, all because what? Because judges don't, they're too scared to have to set new legal precedents. I mean, but hey, if you didn't like the job, you should have went and worked at McDonald's or something, okay? If you weren't up for the task of upholding justice and fairness, okay, which has already been, an established principle and value in our country, okay, equal protection under the law and due process and what have you, okay, then, what are you doing, man? Okay? And why would I run the risk, okay, of representing myself when the obligation remains with the attorney? Okay? So what the attorneys do is they try to play the silent treatment. They try to they gaslight you and strategically ignore you. They don't respond substantively because at the fundamental root level, no attorney, whether public defender or private, I don't care how much you paid for them, Okay, he's not going to attack the license of the prosecutor. He's not going to attack any officer of the court where it will jeopardize their license. You understand, okay? Because judges and lawyers, all essentially are under one organization, that being the state bar. Okay, and I mean, however I got that mixed up, there is no question that the state bar is under the judicial branch, okay, of the state government. Okay, so just understanding abstractly, okay, the hierarchical structure, okay, of our government and our criminal justice system, you know, it's plausible, okay, that these guys would all work to, cover up for each other, even at the expense of a helpless indigent defendant whom they also deemed incompetent, okay, wrongfully. But anyway, let's moving forward here, okay? Under Ricardo Garcia, the LA County Public Defender has virtually left the public helpless against a state gone rogue against its own citizens. If Ricardo Garcia wasn't corrupt, then he'd be applauding me for my zealous legal defense amidst these circumstances, okay? But to help cover up corruption from within his own office, coupled with his fear to confront the court, proves that Garcia is a hollowed out leader who essentially has no true executive function in his professional prowess, okay? He'll advocate for illegal immigrants to have rights, and I mean, I'm not against people having rights, but he would allow an Angelino to be subject of judicial misconduct without remedy, relief, or any type of recourse. Okay, I don't think that's something that he can publicly affirm. Okay, he can his office, other attorneys who's hearing this can disagree all they want and try to label me as quote unquote unhinged. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that Ricardo Garcia is too bitch, okay, to even speak up and stand up for himself, defend his own honor, okay, because he knows, okay, even responding to this matter legitimizes it, okay, regardless of what he says, okay, and right now he's just careful not to be the crux for why, judicial fraud is unraveled in Los Angeles County. You understand, okay? Hey, man, you had a duty here and you failed, okay? For the record, and with all due respect, head public defender Ricardo Garcia is a coward. He is not a real man. He's not a true public defender. He's just a criminal occupying public office, as is the rest of the lawyers, judges, and doctors who have colluded in an attempt to railroad me, okay? The court had to tie my hands behind my back in order to have any case against me. They had to ensure I was completely defenseless for them to even have a shot at destroying my life. And it's these moments and times that present opportunities to stand for justice, opportunities to build, shape, and form character, and to live up to our purpose and fullest potential. When Ricardo looks at himself in the mirror, I'm sure he sees a little bitch looking back at him. I'm not trying to be aimlessly insulting here, okay? I would argue that Garcia has earned this criticism because being the head public defender demands a higher responsibility, not a license to commit crimes and reckless negligence, okay? Anybody who personally knows Ricardo knows he's not a man, okay, who is willing to stand up for the helpless and defenseless, okay? He's perfectly fine being paid to portray this symbol of justice, but in everyday practice, he is a negligent attorney who is biased against whoever the court so chooses. Now, again, it's not so much that my rights were violated, so much as it is having a meaningful opportunity to preserve issues for appeal. Okay? If public defenders are trustworthy instruments of justice, then preserving issues and rights is not something they should have a problem with. Ever. Okay? But, there are interests at play that the court is not comfortable with publicly affirming, right? Because it would signal that they are engaging in conduct outside of their job descriptions. You see. So again, I did this episode because there's got to be some headlines out there on head public defender Ricardo Daniel Garcia. Okay, because again, there's a big responsibility that comes with it. And look, just so this episode makes sense to you, okay, what am I saying? What am I really saying about public defender Ricardo Garcia? Okay, that he essentially allowed his deputy attorneys to, just, treat me like the prosecution is treating me. Okay, the Danielle DeRoca Bell um, basically used my own email statements against me to justify that, I wasn't helping her, assisting her, or that I was incompetent, okay? Just because I said something that they didn't like, okay? And, in life, you're going to encounter people that hate you and don't like you because you actually have knowledge, because you're not dupable, right? Because you're not gullible, you're not naive, right? Because you do understand, right? You understand it's human nature for people to want the opportunity to lie to you. You know what I mean? And I've come to notice that as of late, okay, I've been basically dismantling arguments without ever even getting to the substance of the argument, okay? Because I take a structural approach. Okay, so again, the DA wanted to charge me. Okay, I was game to play by the rules because I know I'm innocent. So I mean, let's play. Okay, let's see who can follow the rules the best. Okay, and I just wanted to be able to challenge the district attorney on the charges. Okay, you want to put people in jail, you gotta play by the rules. Okay, and I did that, and you didn't do that. Okay, every officer of the court is complicit in judicial fraud here. The court relied on evidence that was not only not necessary, authorized, or required. Okay, it violated a standing order. The court still relied on it in violation of their own authority. Okay, so then I began to ask, okay, well, if the court is violating their own court orders, why should I or anybody obey their court orders? Okay, so, I was able to, and look, I know the court and people are not going to like this, but you don't got to like it, but you better love it. Okay, check it out. I was able to understand. Okay, now this is a cheat code for any public defender or anybody with interest to this case. This right here is the context that you're not gonna get anywhere else. Okay, basically, I understood that the government, at least in California, had bad religion. Okay, now I derive my understanding off of the Bible and the Constitution. Okay, I don't need you to be a believer in the Bible. I don't need you to trust and have faith in Jesus Christ, okay, in order for me to know that Jesus Christ is Lord and is the truth, okay? And so, on a very fundamental level, I just started, assessing my attorneys and screening them, qualifying them, right? And just saying, I asked, Christian on lay, I asked them, I said, hey, man, are you Catholic or do you have a Catholic past? Yes, I was using their religion to identify their morality. Yes, because I know, and I don't need you to agree. I don't need you to believe it. I don't need you to like it. Okay, I know that if the attorney is Catholic or has a Catholic past, okay, then they're not honest people. Okay, because again, you may not like it, okay, but between, Christianity as we know it and Catholicism, okay, because, it's a very nuanced debate, they both can't be right. Okay, because if they were both right, why would both need to exist? You understand, okay? And so there are some very steep hurdles that Catholicism doesn't seem to be able to get over. Okay, but yet and still in today's society, it's just injected and presumed to be ecclesiastical and or authoritative, and it's just like, no, it's not. Okay, you got to be careful not to look at things for how they seem, look, or feel. Okay, but what they actually are. So you see, in my case, I'm like, okay, the DA wants to take me to trial. They want to charge me with charge. They want to send me to prison. Okay. Well, before I argue facts, let's make sure that the court even has or the court or the DA even has a legal right to take me to trial. You see, okay? And whether that's right or wrong, whether I'm right or wrong about it, doesn't matter. It's about the access to legal process. You understand, okay? So again, when I tell my attorney, hey, I want to assert equal protection of the laws, and they try to tell me things like, oh, well, we don't think that'll be fruitful, and we equal protection doesn't apply to you, and it doesn't apply to these circumstances, okay? But it wouldn't hurt, right? Okay, to be able to preserve that, okay? And so they know that they don't want to make statutory motions to dismiss or make statutory constitutional right assertions because the judge is the trier of law. Okay, and they know that that's going to position the judge to have to make a decision that they don't really want to make, okay, if they can help it, okay, and either make a decision that they don't want to make or compromise standing binding case law, established case law. Okay, and you just, understanding these dynamics, you understand where your power is actually at. Okay, I wouldn't let the public defenders get away with not protecting my constitutional rights. And today, March 13th, okay, at noon, okay, 11:57 a.m., okay, the public defenders still haven't protected my rights. They're still covering up everything that has happened, and they're trying to distance themselves from my case. Okay, but they're not going to get away. Okay, I don't care what they tell themselves. Okay, I don't care who they touch base with, okay, or who they consult. Okay, you already lost. Why did you already lose? Because attorney-client privilege is presumed. You see. So even though you implicitly waived it, right, upon me claiming the privilege, all the downstream proceedings are tainted and void. Okay, and I don't need a judge, okay, to rule on whether or not I can claim privilege or not, because again, it's presumed. If there's no authorization or consent waiver, it's presumed, okay? And I know you don't got that because I never gave it to you, right? And I never gave it to you because you never asked. And you never asked because you knew damn well I wouldn't give it to you. But you did it anyway, right? Because you had to act in a way that would allow you to impose your will in my life, okay? And I reject and rebuke that witchcraft in the name of Jesus Christ. You see, because I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, because I know, okay, I believe like I know, okay, that Jesus Christ is Lord, then I was able to use biblical principles to undermine and derail the criminal case. And so what happened? Right? Biblical principles starting to play out. Okay, what do you mean by that, Michael? I'll tell you what I mean. He who digs a pit will fall into it. A stone will come back on he who starts it rolling. Right? So, in the process of them declaring me incompetent, when you actually examine the record, they're the ones who look incompetent. Okay? And I remain the only one who hasn't actually committed a crime here. Okay, so again, I'm not going to just continue on and on and on because I really can, okay? But I just really wanted to highlight how head public defender Ricardo Garcia has failed. Okay, not just residents and citizens. Okay, but public safety abroad. Okay, everybody, y'all was the first line of defense, fam. Okay, there's no excuse for you. I wish you play this episode in your office with every attorney, every deputy attorney who's present. Just play this whole thing and let everybody hear it. And I bet you, if y'all go back and snicker with each other about how deranged I am or how this or that I am, knowing that I'm right, okay, knowing that you can't meet me on substance, knowing that I outclassed you and your attorneys in your own venue without a law degree, barely with a high school diploma. I mean, my high school diploma is so unknown from an unknown school, okay, as it is, okay. I relied on God, okay, and God gave me the math. He showed me what they were trying to do. He gave me an analytical, brilliant mind to be able to piece these things together and maintain some form of competent articulation, okay? So, without further ado, man, it's your boy, Mr. Will. That's the deal. Head public defender Ricardo Garcia needs to be ousted, okay, needs to be removed, okay, from public office, and he needs some type of strike under his supervisory role as a public defender, just but as an attorney altogether, okay. It's your boy Mr. Will. That's the deal, and until next time, I'm out.